What are we cheersing to?
Rory McIlroy, Grand Slam. I mean, this is something that is very hard to do, and it doesn't happen often. And it's super cool that we get to see it live. That was
Yeah.
pretty sweet. Congrats to Rory. Man, Masters Sunday wrapped up today. How about that? What a day, huh?
Oh, it was unbelievable. And I was pumped for it because you love the Masters, you love all the major tournaments and stuff like that. But over the past few years, they've been kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah.
But you got the whole deal with not everybody playing in it, and then you got some people that you don't really know too much about unless you're a diehard golf person
Mhm.
that's in contention at the end of these things. And but this one, I was pumped for it because we had big name guys that were in contention going into Masters Sunday. I brought out the azaleas, to put on, and I was into it, and it just makes for better golf when you got the guys that you know the casual fan can get behind, that people
Right.
people know about, right? Like, I mean, I'm gonna watch every single one just because it's golf, right? But there's just something about it when you've got Justin Rose and Rory McIlroy, Bryson DeChambeau, and all, and then Scheffler's in the mix, and
Mhm.
you got, so when you got the big names there, it just makes for a better Sunday, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was up and down all over the
Yep.
place. I mean, it was crazy, and you, Rory pulled. He's one of
Yeah. That's
six
insane.
dudes
Hmm.
in the history of the thing, and I mean, we're talking about, like, okay, so Rory completes his today, 2025. Tiger Woods completed his in 2000, Jack Nicklaus in 1996, Gary Player, or 1966, Gary Player in 1965, Ben Hogan 1953, and Gene Sarazen in 1935. That's the list you're on. I mean, say what you will about Rory and everything else. You're one of six.
Yeah. One of six. It's crazy. I mean, that's like you talk about needle in a haystack. Like it is something that's very hard to do. And it obviously one of six. Like, no, it's a very hard thing to accomplish, but it was really cool being able to see that. And like you mentioned, you don't really, as a casual golf fan, you don't really tune into all these tournaments or whatever, but everybody's watching the Masters, whether you follow golf or not. Everybody's watching the Masters. It's one of the more entertaining and exciting tournaments because it seems like everybody always comes out, brings their A game. And then not only did Rory do something crazy like career Grand Slam in the biggest golf tournament there is, but it happened in a playoff too. Like, I mean, the storyline was pretty incredible. I mean, like you could make a movie out of it, right? It was all across the board, and it'll probably bring in some new golf fans. There's people that weren't really into
Yeah.
golf that watched the Masters this year. They're like, wait, this was actually really cool. We'll see how it goes.
I mean, let's look at it, right? Like, so going into today, Rory's got the lead. He loses the lead after hole two. I mean, he comes out of the gate and just stumbles. And Bryson's like, okay, cool. And so he takes over after hole two. And then Rory doesn't fold. He grinds and he comes back. And then Bryson kind of falls off the wagon. And I mean, at one point it was like, did he just go home? Like,
That
it
was
was
unbelievable.
he was just, it was horrible. But then all of a sudden you see Scotty Scheffler's coming up the leaderboard. Justin Rose coming. I mean, he was at -5. He was at 5 under coming into today. And then, he and Rory's at 12 under. And you're thinking, this is 7 shots. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. And then all of a sudden, Justin Rose just plays out of his mind, nails that birdie putt on 18 that was unbelievable to really make Rory, have to fight. And we were talking about this, where, coming up to 18, it was like, all he's got to do is make par and he
Yep.
wins this thing. All he's got to do is make par. Don't get silly, just put the ball in the fairway, and then, give yourself then if you got a good shot to get into the green, and then you give yourself 2 putts to win the doggone thing. And he the tee shot, he put it right there. He put it right there and
Yeah.
then leaked the second shot into the sand. And it was like, oh man, still
And
had a chance to get up and down,
of course.
but struggle. I mean, we were sitting there saying and laughing about it was, imagine the stress level on that putt,
Oh
that
my
par
God.
putt that he had on 18. And not just for any player, but for Rory too. This is
Right.
17 times at the Masters and he hasn't been able to win it. I mean, it's been 9 years since he won a major, trying to, complete that. So it's all of that building and building and building, which makes it even more difficult. And then, he just pulled the putt and missed it, but then locked in on that playoff, and
Yeah.
it was awesome.
That shot that he had when he landed on the green before the winning putt. I mean, that was as clutch can be. Right? I mean, Rose came out, he had a great drive, and then he had a great shot, and he looked like, I mean, he put it right on the green, and we're like, oh, great, here we go. And Rose was nailing putts all day long,
Yeah.
and obviously Rory was struggling with putts. Um, and then he gets up there on his second stroke, and he put that. I mean, it's almost like he picked it up and set it down on the green. It was an incredible clutch shot, set him up for a super 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 chip shot putt. I say that, but as we've seen today, there is no such thing as a chip shot putt. And another point too, I will say going into this tournament today on Sunday, it started to feel a little eerily similar to when he choked at what was it, the U.S. Open, and Bryson swooped in, and it was almost like we were like, okay, we're gonna get a rematch here, and then right out the gate, Bryson starts taking the lead and starts playing well, and we're like, oh no, is it gonna happen again? Like we're gonna have to really really check on Rory. But Bryson fell off, and Rory he nutted up, he locked in, and he got it done. Super 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 cool to see.
Yeah, and say what you will. I mean, whether you like Rory or not, or whatever, it's a great accomplishment. And I mean, yeah, and it's been a tough year for him. I mean, he had the whole deal where he's like, going to get divorced from his wife. No, we're not, and all this other kind of stuff. So he's got all that going on and everything. And then I had all these confrontations with the whole live golfers and that whole thing. He's kind of reeled back on that and stopped being so combative and everything about that. And so it say what you will about him. I mean, he's one of six. It's incredible. It's an incredible accomplishment, and it was cool to see. So but I do want to bring, that leads into the whole
Yeah.
thing about the live golf, right? And so when this first happened, and I mean, we knew that there was players that were unhappy on the PGA Tour. They were like, the purse amounts for the tournaments were not growing with the game and with how much these tournaments were bringing in and things like that. And the players were like, well, why are we doing this? And then there was the regulations that PGA had that said you have to play in X number of tournaments. And these guys are like, can we take a week off or something, along
Mhm.
those lines? And there was all of these things that they didn't like about what the PGA was doing. Especially the biggest one was Sergio. He just, I mean, he made it known every time a rules official would come over, and he'd be like, "I yeah, you hate you guys" or whatever. And so then this live golf stuff happens, and the idea behind it was we want to create an atmosphere like the Ryder Cup, but every week. And my initial thought on it was, okay, well, that's kind of cool, but the Ryder Cup is the Ryder Cup because it happens every so many years.
Right.
It's like we were talking about the World Baseball Classic, right?
Mhm.
Like if you're doing that every year, it's not the
Right.
same, and it doesn't have that same,
Mhm.
intensity to it. So I was a bit like, okay, let's see what happens. Then they started getting some big name players. I mean, they got Sergio, they got Phil, they got then Dustin Johnson goes over, and now you get Patrick Reed going over, probably because a lot of his button heads with some of the other players and all these other kinds of things. But then you get like, Brooks Koepka
Yep.
and Bryson DeChambeau goes over there, and then John Rahm was the latest big one. And it's like, okay, now let's see. But one, you couldn't watch it. You had to stream it on YouTube or wherever to try to find it. And then number two, then when it did go, it was like you had to get a subscription app to the CW. And then now like there's some that are on regular TV, but it's already lost its luster. And the big thing for me is these players were not in these other tournaments, these other big tournaments. And so that, it made it, kind of like, oh, I wish you had all the big names in it. And now all of a sudden these guys can come and play. Well, a lot of them didn't make the cut. So then it goes back to, well, live is 3 rounds, and they don't play as many tournaments, and maybe they don't have the stamina now to come in and play in these 4 round tournaments and things like that. Look, it, I it was an experiment, and it didn't work. I think Brooks and Bryson and those guys are kind of like, yeah, maybe I go
Right.
back. And
Right.
John Rahm, the Sergios and the Phils probably never will. Phil's, at the twilight of his career anyway. And
Yeah.
Sergio just hates everything having to do with the PGA. Dustin Johnson, I don't know. He almost seems like he's just disinterested anymore. So it happened. It was an experiment. It didn't work. Let's be done with it. Let's merge. Let's have this whatever we need to do or whatever. Let's get these guys back into these tournaments, and let's get stuff like we had today happening on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I agree. And it's a good point too, because you look at other sports that have tried things like this, right? Football, obviously you've got the USFL, which back in the day it worked, they had good players and it worked a little bit, but then they
For a
tried
few
to
years,
for a few
two,
years,
three
right?
years,
And then, you got the XFL, and then they try to bring the USFL back, and then they have to merge the XFL and the USFL. Now it's the UFL. And it's like, you can't, when you try and do things like this, there's always going to be, I mean, should we even talk about it with like MMA and wrestling? Like Bellator MMA is out, but UFC is where you go, right? That's where everybody is. I mean, when it comes to WWE, right? AEW is out there, Ring of Honor, TNA, whatever, but WWE is where you go, right? And so it's the same thing. If I'm gonna sit here and watch quality golf, and if I'm gonna really decide, and golf's one of those sports where it's not the easiest to get into, right? If you don't know much about it or whatever, and it's not always as exciting. And that's another thing too. Like today's tournament, it's not tournaments aren't always going to be like how they were today, right? I mean, this just
Mhm.
golf the way golf is. Like today, just that not all the tournaments are going to play out that way. But fact of the matter is, you've tried it, right? Just like these other sports, they've tried it, but at the end of the day, we know what the real one is. And I think it's time for golf is such a smaller sport, I would say, compared to these other ones. It reel it in, like you're saying, and let's just, because it is, imagine this tournament today if you did have those guys that all jumped over to live. Imagine you had some of those guys in this tournament today. Obviously Bryson was in it, but imagine Brooks Koepka in this tournament,
Well,
or
he didn't make the cut. And
oh,
that was
he didn't
and
make
that
the
was
cut.
kind of
Okay,
thing.
so
That was
that's
but that's the point, right? Like, so you had these guys like Phil played, Sergio played, but they didn't make the cut. And so that's kind of where it is, right? Like if these guys are playing regular PGA tournaments, maybe they do make the cut. Maybe, so but that's the frustrating part about it, right? Is like these guys, you're used to seeing all of these dudes, the Bubba Watsons and all of these guys in playing on the weekend. They make the cut. They play on the weekend. Some of them are in contention, some of them aren't, but at least they're there in the weekend, and you get to see them, and you get to, be like, oh, come on, get in, get in contention. And oh, they don't, but at least there's that draw to it there. Not to say that we don't want to see guys like Oberg, who you came out of nowhere and had a shot completely flamed out on 18,
yeah,
but I don't blame him because it's the Masters, and
right.
and all the other kind of stuff. And you love to see those kinds of things, but you want to see that in the midst of having the big names that carry the sport in there. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like having him be the fifth guy in five guys that have a chance of winning this thing, and the other four are superstars.
Yeah.
Makes it incredible. Instead of you got one superstar who's on the fringe of being in contention, and then you got four guys that you know have never really won anything,
Right.
and there's no interest and excitement in it. So let's get all these guys back. Let's get them back up to speed. Let's get the tournaments, because the things that live golf, the reasons why people went there was for some of these things that have been fixed by the PGA since. There's discussions that they've had over the last couple of years. The purse money's gone up,
Yeah.
so that's number one. I think that they've changed some of the regulations as far as requirements of what tournaments guys have to be in and those kinds of things. So PGA did listen. Live kind of accomplished what it needed to accomplish. So let's let it run its course. Or has run its course, and let's bring them back. Let's be done with it. Let's get these guys back, and let's have fun like we had today.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And we'll see how it plays out, right? Like you mentioned in the video on TikTok we posted today. It's like the start of spring, right?
It
Um
is.
and golf is going to be in full effect. It's all summer long. We're going to be seeing some cool competitions here. And it'll be interesting too to see how Rory continues to go after this too.
Yeah, I mean, it could give him new life,
Yeah.
which would be cool. But yeah, and and you had brought up before we even started talking about this too. Like, if you're gonna do something that's going to be like off kilter or whatever, but like the Tiger Woods Rory thing that they've got on ESPN now, that's like played in stadiums.
Go.
Like,
Yeah.
that's something fun for people to do outside of the grind of these tournaments,
Right.
and it's not competing with the tournaments. You
Correct.
you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
just for
that's,
fun and it's,
yeah,
and it's a cool concept
kind of
too.
like banana ball with
Yep.
the Major League Baseball, like the Savannah Bananas, and
Yep.
they've got these things, and it's something different that you can be involved in, but doesn't compete. It's not meant to compete with the league that
Right.
you're never going to be able to compete against. And
Yep.
so, that's kind of where that's at. But
Yeah. So fun day today of golf. It's like you said, the start of spring. Speaking of, the start of spring and getting into summer and
well,
everything.
I want to hold on before you do that. I want to ask you a question though, because there was like, I saw a thing to where there was like five things that
Oh,
can be considered the start of spring.
okay.
One, is it opening day of baseball? Does that mark the official start of spring? Is it the Masters tournament that starts the official start of spring? Is it the Kentucky Derby? Is another one. The Final Four was one. Um,
I wouldn't say the final four, no.
okay. So what do you,
You've got three solid arguments for Kentucky Derby, Masters, and
or
baseball.
I think the fifth one that I saw that was on there was the NFL draft,
NFL draft's a decent one too.
because they're all
Honestly,
right around,
yeah.
so.
I mean, baseball, but they have spring training. So how can opening day be the start of spring when you have spring training?
Mhm.
Technically,
And we
wouldn't
all
that
know in the Midwest that
it
when
doesn't
spring
matter.
training is going on, there's
It's
no
not
such
spring.
thing as spring. I
No.
mean, I got my old man cardigans on because it's
Well,
cold.
well, also too, like how many opening days or opening series in Detroit has there been snow and it's been 40 degrees and open? Like you can't call that sprint. I don't know. I would say something more along the lines of like the Kentucky Derby or the Masters because it's a one-time thing. Whereas baseball, you got a whole season that runs through summer and then goes into October. The NFL draft is just a prelude to the end of summer, and that's when the season starts. So I would say something like the Masters or the Kentucky Derby. I wouldn't say the Final Four. That's March Madness. It's all that and whatnot. And plus, I mean, it ends. So I don't. I would go with Masters or Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, I tend to think, as much as I love baseball, the baseball guy and everything else, and love opening day, and it should be a national holiday and all that kind of stuff. I I I lean more towards the Masters being the official start of spring, because one, yeah, you're right. It's the one event, and then that's it. And then also at the same time, being where it's located, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get some beautiful weather.
Hmm.
It's gonna you watching it, even if you're in an area like where it's still 40 degrees and you get maybe a little rainy or whatever. You turn on the Masters, you're seeing sunshine,
Hmm.
people in shorts and in short sleeves and stuff like that, and you're like, okay, it's spring,
It's
spring's
spring.
here, and I think that's kind of a cool thing about the Masters too, which makes it so. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of other stuff we could talk
Yeah.
all day about the Masters.
Yeah.
How the rules that you have, like you can't have your cell phone.
Phones. Yep.
The way that the price for the foods and the concessions is so cheap, and it's
Hmm.
it's the minimalist foods, like
Hmm.
the pimento cheese sandwich on white bread, and you know what I
Yeah.
mean. It's cool, the nuances of it, and that they're able to kind of keep it confined and
Hmm.
into that, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah.
What you were.
Yeah. Well, because you mentioned Final Four. We just
Yeah.
had the national championship. The Florida Gators took it. Boy, what was Houston doing on that last possession there? I mean, that was great defense by Florida, or just an absolute lackluster choke of a possession. Not sure, but yeah, man, we had our, we did our brackets. How did yours play out? I forgot what you ended up picking. You picked Florida
Well,
to win,
so
yeah?
so in my bracket, I had Florida to win, but remember when
Yeah,
we the Final Four was
you had
set,
Duke.
and I picked Auburn and Duke in the final. So once again, proving that I don't know shit about sports, and it was just kind of completely wrong about it. But um, I will say that I actually thought that the Final Four was awesome, and
It
we've
was some
gone
good
through
basketball.
we've gone through years again where it's just like, okay, so and so blew so and so out, and then it's like this, and then it just wasn't. I thought this was awesome. I thought all three games were good games. I mean, Florida Auburn was awesome. I mean, Florida was able to pull that one out, and then like, okay, so now what's Duke and Houston going to give us? It looked like Duke was going to boat race it. I mean, they
Yeah,
were up by 12,
yeah.
14 points. And then all of a sudden, I mean, even late in the game, we were
Hmm.
sitting there talking about how at a minute 17 left, and you've got, I think Duke still had a 9 or 11 point lead. How do you lose that game? Yeah, and I had to rewind it and watch it back, and I was like, we made, Duke made one free throw in, I
Yeah.
mean, it was
Unbelievable.
crazy.
Unbelievable.
But see, I think the key part of it was because Duke's a great free throw shooting team. Key part of that game was Houston was able to make big shots that drew the game close enough to where they didn't have to foul. And so they weren't giving up points on possessions. They were able to play defense instead of having to foul to get the ball back. They were able to play defense, and their defense was so good they were able to get the steals and the stops and then make shots again. And I think that was key. If they would have made one less three leading into that last minute and a half, they would have had to go to that foul situation, and then Duke would have just kept making free throws,
Hmm.
and you would have been chasing it. But
Right.
but no, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
And then,
and
Florida Auburn game was good. Um, Another super close game, and it just ended up coming down to Florida was the better team. Um, And then, you got Florida and Houston. In all reality, when Houston came back and beat Duke like that, I was like, because we made our video and on our podcast before, we both said, yeah, we're not going to talk about Houston because we just don't see it. And boy, were we wrong. Once again, it proves that maybe we should look into other hobbies because apparently we don't know what we're talking about. But I,
yeah, we had no idea,
you
no
would have
clue.
thought that after that we would have been like, okay, well, let's maybe take Houston a little bit more seriously. No, they beat Duke, and I still said, well, Florida's going to win by 90. I was telling all my friends down here in Florida, Gator fans, I was like, yeah, you guys got it in a bag, whatever. And then it came down to the last possession. So
Yeah.
I got to give a big apology to Houston because I overlooked them like an MFer, and boy, did I look stupid.
No, they did. But see, here's the thing about Houston, though, and I had said this early on, and when we did our way too early predictions and stuff, and I said Houston's one of those teams that's gonna be there. simply because they play defense and they play probably the best defense of anybody in the country. And defense is one of those things that doesn't slump. Like we saw what happened to Tennessee and what happened to Michigan State, both in those Elite Eight games, right? Like they got themselves in a bad spot because they just were not making shots. I mean, it was unbelievable
Mhm.
that they couldn't hit shots. I mean, they were open looks. They weren't taking bad, they just weren't making anything. I think Tennessee had 15 points at halftime, and I think Michigan State had, you know, in the 20s or something like that. They couldn't score. But with Houston, it doesn't matter because they're not going to let you score. Like they live in the 50s with those games and
They
stuff like
do.
that. It doesn't slump, and so they're always in it. And then if they do get hot, then that's when they beat you. So
Right.
that's kind of how they lived, and they were right
And
there at the very end.
yeah. 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 They were right there. And like you just meant, it was a low scoring game too. They didn't get into the 70s, 80s, 90s. It was a low score. It was a defensive game. And that last possession, do you say Houston just kind of shit the bed or did Florida just lock it down? I mean, a little bit of both,
I
maybe.
think it was kind of a little bit of both. The unfortunate part about that last possession was, and two, I forget the player's name on Houston who had the ball. To his credit, he knew and understood the rules. But unfortunately, what happened was he got himself in a position to where he was elevated, and either he felt like he couldn't get a shot off, or he felt like the person he was going to pass to then got covered, and he couldn't come back down with the ball because it would have been a travel. And then so he let go of the ball, but the rule is that he can't be the first one to touch it again, or else it's a travel.
Right.
So he was smart enough to like kind of like shield off the Florida player from getting the ball as it's bouncing. And it took a second for one of the other Houston players to realize, oh, I've got to go help him out. Like he can't touch this ball again. And so they lost like a second and a half, 2 seconds there. And then it was a scrum for the ball. And then that's when they just
Yeah. At that point, time ran out.
right. So it was an unfortunate thing, like, so I don't know. Yes, Florida was playing great defense. But and I don't know if Houston really shit the bed on it as much as it just was one of those. It was just a weird thing that happened that unfortunately, they weren't able to get the shot off and ended up losing the game. So
Yeah. But I think it was a fantastic end to the college basketball season. It ended on a fantastic game. Congrats to Florida. They had a great season. They were playing lights out at the end. And then
yeah.
unfortunately, though, we wanted Sparty or Tennessee to do it. And speaking of Sparty and Tennessee, so not only do we had two of our best players on Michigan State enter the transfer portal after that Auburn loss. Trey Holloman just announced he's committing to NC State, which I don't get that totally. But then we shift gears here. Now you got Tennessee, not basketball, but football. Nico Maliava, his last name actually, I'm Olivia because he's out. But it's a very weird way. Like players entering the transfer portal in college football isn't strange anymore because it's just unfortunately what it is. But the way this one happened was very interesting. I haven't seen a player kind of depart from a university like this. It was very, very odd.
And we touched on it. Like
Mhm.
I did my little rant. Um, and I don't want to keep repeating myself how I feel about the transfer portal and NIL. And I mean, Nick Saban, say whatever, crotchety old man, he predicted that this is
Mhm.
exactly what's going to happen. He said 90% of the players that you talk to, it's the first two things they say are, one, can you guarantee me playing time, and two, how much are you going to pay me? And
Mhm.
he's like, this
Right.
isn't what I want to be involved in, and everything else. So you get into a situation. So, just to briefly recap the Nico situation, and we have a little bit more information from the first one that I put out. But so it's reported, and Nico's dad is calling the guy a bitch and everything else, whatever, that reported this. Which, again, when the
Right.
adults aren't being adults, then what chances do the kids have? But anyway, so the guy reports it. I forget what his name was. He reports that Nico's looking for, a deal, trying to renegotiate and everything else. And then, so Nico's dad comes out and says that and everything. And then all of a sudden Nico stops showing up to practices and right before the spring game. And then, Heupel goes in and tells the team, yeah, he's gone. He's transferring out. He wants to go into the transfer portal because we're not meeting his demands or whatever. Then the weird part of, if that wasn't weird enough that this happened, then the weird part is then it's reporting that Dan Lanning in Oregon had reached out to Josh Heupel and said, hey, I just want to let you know your guy's sniffing around for a deal. So I was saying, I speculated, when the whole thing first came out, I said, well, maybe somebody reached out to Nico and offered him something. And he went back to Tennessee and said, hey, I'm getting offered this. Do you want to match it? Maybe I do want to take this or whatever. But no, now it's starting to see like that Nico initiated the whole thing. And again, we don't know if it was Nico or Nico's dad influencing all the, the people that are supposed to be the adults in the room doing this. But this is where we're at today because of what the precedent we set. I mean, we saw it at the beginning of the season when Bryce Underwood was committed to LSU, and then Dave Portnoy comes out and says, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to raise up a bunch of money and we're just going to pay him $20 million a year, whatever he wants to get him here. And then that happened. It was 10 million, but whatever.
Right.
So then he flipped. So now it's like your commitment means nothing. And I get, people are going to say, well, oh, coaches can leave whatever they want to. And I don't think that that's right either. And there has
No.
been some times where, people, but at least they have contracts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's buyouts and all this other kind of stuff. It, let's handle the kids the same way that we handle the coaches. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get contracts, not commitments. Let's get contracts. And if you violate the contract, then you have to pay back some of the money. You know what I mean? And so I think that again, if it's gonna be a business, let's run it like a business, because right
Mm-hmm.
now nobody knows what the rules are. Nobody knows. I get it. Yes, students should be these kids should be paid because they're creating revenue. They're doing something that a very small percentage of the population can do. And I get all that stuff and everything else. I'm not arguing against that. All I'm saying is let's figure it out so that we know what the rules are going in. It takes me back to Maurice Claret from Ohio State when he entered himself into the draft and signed an agent because somebody told him that he would be able to contest the rule of having to be out of high school for 3 years. And then he wasn't able to get that overturned and the NFL didn't draft him. Then he couldn't go back to college because he had already signed with an agent and he was just done. And it was adults that got in his ear and ruined the poor kid in his college career and NFL career and everything else. And I think we're going to see something like this happen until we can get some adults and some people who like have a little bit of common sense to figure it out and put some parameters around the deal.
Yeah, I agree. And our very first episode that we ever recorded for this podcast, we talked about this. And then we've touched on it throughout our tenure of making this so far. And then this happens, and we've touched on it more and more, and we can't touch on it enough, right? I mean, like we mentioned in the first episode, went from law and order to martial law. It kind of happened overnight, right? Like they made the decision. I mean, you think about, right, Reggie Bush, and then you go back to Jim Tressel and all these, and Cam Newton's and all these guys, like anybody that's been busted for this type of stuff, getting paid and sponsorships and all this stuff before. And then the conversation for all these years was, well, these players deserve to get paid, and yada yada yada. Well, okay, so then they make the decision now that it's okay for these players to start getting paid, and it look what happened. Like out of nowhere, look at it now. I mean, yes, do the players deserve to get paid? I think so, but it's gotten completely out of control. There's no structure to it. There's no, it's just kind of gone completely out of control, and we're watching it continue to go out of control every day, each and every day. It's frustrating and it sucks because it's changing the game a bit.
It's changing football. It's changing
Yep.
basketball, and
Yeah.
it changes college baseball too. There's a lot of it's happening in every sport now, and the problem is that the NCAA, the supposed regulatory body of this whole thing, has zero power
Mhm.
because they're afraid that there were already talks that teams in the Big Ten, the SEC, and the ACC and stuff were going to completely withdraw from the NCAA and start their own league.
Yeah.
And so we see that the NCAA is so hesitant to step in and institute, violations or penalties because they don't want to push these teams. I mean, we see one of the most egregious things that's happened in college football over the last, 5 years, and they're not going to do anything about it.
Mhm.
They're not. I mean, it's and to the point to where the the ones that violated all the rules and broke all the rules are getting to the point to where like they're just like whatever, we'll even
Yeah.
admit to it, it doesn't matter, nothing's
Yeah.
going to happen to us.
Right.
It was, so that's where we're at with it, because the NCAA is not going to step in and do anything because they're like, well, we still want to be at least be able to make some money off of
Mhm.
them. If we let them be the Wild West and do whatever they want, then we can still make money off of them. And we don't care if it's regulated or not, because if we try to, they're going to leave.
Yeah.
Well, it was brought up a while back. I forget who was the first person who brought it up or whatever, but I know Pat McAfee talks about it
Mhm.
all the time about making Nick Saban the commissioner of college football. And I think that that's exactly what needs to happen. Or a commission body made up of multiple people or something, but there needs to be something that says this makes sense, this doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
And let's figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hopefully something can be done about it because it's frustrating and it's completely changing the game and it's making it's not unwatchable yet, but I can see it getting there, right? And as a fan too, it sucks because you can't even be like, oh, this guy's good. Like I'm like, we got a good quarterback, like we're good for the next couple years. We're in good hands. No, because no, he could be gone next year, it sucks. It
And I
sucks.
want to bring up one more thing too,
Mhm.
because people were sitting there saying, well, these kids should be able to make X amount of dollars or whatever because of what it costs for us to go to the games and all these other kinds of things. Well, we know that that money that is not specific. They're not just saying, oh, okay, well, we've been sitting on this pile of cash, so now we're going to pay these players or whatever. What we're finding out is every single major program in the country is raising their ticket prices over and over and over and over again because they want to bring in more. What's going to happen is if you have to pay a kid $10 million, then you have to pay a kid $15 million, then it gets up into the $20 million range. The ticket prices are going to get to the point to where the regular fan can't even go
Mhm.
anymore.
Right.
And at what point do you even stop allowing students to buy tickets?
Right.
So where is this gonna stop? And that's you know
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
it's
that's my
unfortunate.
rant.
It's unfortunate. I mean, like I said, it's just there's so many levels to it now that it's not just affecting, oh, these players deserve to get paid. Because yeah, I mean these players work hard, and now that the video game's back, their images and likeness and all this type of stuff, which is the reason why college football video game got taken away in the first place, and all these kinds of things. So it just one simple little conversation of should college athletes get paid has turned into a whole thing that is altering college sports as a whole now.
Right, because you said you answered that question and said yes, but then that was the end of the discussion. Like,
Yep.
okay, yes.
Right. Yes, they can, and
It's
now look, here we are.
Yeah. It's like, oh, should I be able to drive? Yes. Okay. So,
Boom. There you go. Here are the keys.
let's speed as fast
Mhm.
as I want to go, not no traffic lights, no anything else. This
Mhm.
is kind of where it's at, right? Like there's been no speed limits, there's been no traffic lights, there's been none of that. It's just here's the keys to the car and do whatever you want with it. And it's it's a problem. So, and I'm not, again, I'm not saying go back to the old way. I'm saying yes. I mean, absolutely. Like it's just let's be smart about it. Like,
Right.
figure it out. Like it's
Yeah.
just
And
it's
that's the
silly
thing.
to
It's
me.
just it's my right. It's silly and it's mind boggling. All these higher ups and all these suits and ties, all these, and it's universities, by the way. These are people with degrees. This is education at the same time. Why can nothing be figured out? It honestly it boggles my mind. It's a very, very confusing situation. But hopefully things can start getting structured here. Before we sign off, while we're on the topic of college football, though, let's you want to do our way, way, way too early national champion prediction? What do we got? These
Oh, for
for football, because a lot of the spring games took place over the weekend. A lot of teams have opted out of the spring game. That's another conversation we can have for another episode too. But
right.
some of the teams have had their spring games. A lot of these the players are back and getting acclimated and back into the flow of things. So I'll let you go first. I think we already know who my way too early prediction is going to be. So I'll let you go first.
Well, I mean, they're obviously in the mix. Ohio State's obviously in the mix, and you got Julian saying who's probably going to be the guy. Um, and we'll see. Unless who knows? I mean, what if Ohio State, sides Nico? It's been talked that Notre Dame was
Mhm.
another one too. That's a contender. That okay, well, are you going to go with Angeli, or are you going to go with Carr as your quarterback, and you got these guys, or it was already reported that that's one of the places where Nico could go to as well.
Mhm.
So there's a lot that still has to happen. The last spring transfer portal is April 16th through the 25th. So um that I think it's kind of funny that that's also right
Mhm.
after tax season too.
Yeah.
So it maybe but anyway, um so I don't know. And then you look at, okay, well, what SEC teams
Mhm.
are there? Is Alabama really going to continue to take a step back? Is Georgia going to be back? Um, you got I Tennessee. What is Tennessee going to
Mhm.
do? I mean, with their quarterback situation. So I think that it's hard for me to pick Oregon because every time I pick Oregon, I get burned, and they just can't seem to get over that hump.
Mhm.
They're always there. They're always one of the best teams in the country.
Yeah.
But I do think that where we're at right now, I think that probably two of the biggest contenders, I think that going into it are Ohio State and Notre Dame.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I could pull, and say, okay, well, what is it going to be? Arizona State's going to come out of nowhere again and do this thing or whatever. I don't know, but
Wouldn't that be
you know what?
something?
I'm just gonna go ahead and call. I'm gonna say, you know what? I love Marcus Freeman. I think that regardless what they do at the quarterback position, I think CJ Carr is going to be the guy. Whether he's the guy in week one, he's definitely going to be the guy when it comes playoff time. And I think that the way everybody's saying from what you see, he's a leader and everything else. And so I think that I think that Marcus Freeman's gonna end the drought at Notre Dame, and we're gonna be singing "Here Come the Irish." So
Yeah.
that's where I'm going.
I like it. I like it. I really like Freeman a lot. What he's done with that program is unbelievable, and he's done some great things, and the guys love him. You know, the
Love him.
recruits love him. The
I think
guys love him. I
everybody
mean,
loves him.
yeah,
He just
everybody loves
yeah.
the guy. I mean, how can you not? I mean, he's such a great guy. On and off the field. But yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think they're definitely up there. Obviously, I'm gonna say we're gonna run it back as Ohio State here. I watched a little bit of our spring game yesterday. Yeah, Julian Sand looked pretty good. Then you had Keen Holtz came in. He had some reps. He looked good. And then Tavian St. Clair, true freshman, 5-star. He's a 5-star true freshman. We'll see how if he ends up staying. Who knows? He might transfer out, with today's day and age. But we got some options there. To be honest with you, I would be really upset if we signed Nico. I don't think it's necessary. Um, but yeah, I think we're gonna run it back. I mean, we just extended Ryan Day. And again, I don't think championships are something that we're worried about. I think unfortunately we need to just beat Michigan. That's what it comes down to. I don't think we're really concerned about getting back into the playoff and making a natty run. I think at this
And
point,
but that's another one too. That's not going to be. I mean,
mhm,
it's a tough game every year anyway. But I
mm,
mean, like you brought up Tavian St. Clair, I mean, they got Bryce Underwood,
yeah,
and they're going to be much improved from last year. So that's the big one again.
yep, and it always will be a big one. Um, but yeah, and then of course, Texas, is Arch Manning going to be the guy to come in, and is he going to live up to the hype? I mean, who knows? We'll see, but
That's the thing. I wonder, but again, with the way that the playoff is and everything else now, like it used to be that, if you run the gauntlet of a conference or whatever, then you're going to struggle into the playoff or whatever. But now, like, you don't have to really run that gauntlet of your conference anymore. Like,
right.
you're going to get in,
Hmm.
and so, yeah, I mean, Texas is there. Texas, they're on the short list.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting, and especially now with this 12 team playoff, as we saw last year, some teams can come out of nowhere, make some noise that you never would expect to be in there. So I think that's
All
all
right.
we got for this week. Like I said, we wrapped
Do
up
it.
the Masters. Golf's getting ready to get underway. We'll see how that can continues to play out. We'll keep updates on where Nico goes. Baseball still in full effect. Still got some baseball to go over and talk about, and the NFL draft coming up. So got some content to pump out here. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the YouTube, followed on TikTok and Instagram. All of that is in the link in the description. And once again, congrats, Rory.
Nice job, Roy.